Welcome to this morning's international news. Let's hear the headlines first. Biden describes his phone call with Trump about coronavirus response. Trump removes independent watchdog tasked with overseeing coronavirus emergency funds. Jack Dorsey sets aside $1 billion for charity. His initial focus coronavirus relief efforts. Bangladesh arrests fugitive killer of founder Mujibur Rahman. And FIFA backs contract extensions and flexible transfer windows. These were the headlines. Let's jump into the details news now. Former Vice President Joe Biden on Tuesday said that he told President Donald Trump in their phone call that the federal response to the novel coronavirus pandemic is about taking responsibility. The call, which took place Monday, marked a rare moment of direct communication between the two political rivals. The president has harshly civilized Biden over a range of issues for months, and the former vice president has repeatedly excorized Trump's handling of the virus outbreak. But while speaking with CNN's Chris Cuomo on prime time Tuesday, Biden said that the two had a good conversation. I laid out what I thought he should do. I laid out 4 or 5 specific points that I thought were necessary. I indicated that it is about taking responsibility and being the commander-in-chief, taking on the responsibility. He asked whether or not we would not discuss the detail of what we talked about. Just saying that we had a good conversation, Biden said of the call. He was very gracious in his conversation. So it was the president. I had an opportunity to tell him what I would have done, what I thought, the lessons we learned. President Donald Trump has removed the acting inspector general for the Defense Department, Glenn Fine, from his post, a decision that means Fine will no longer chair the Pandemic Response Authority Availability Committee tasked with overseeing $2 trillion in emergency coronavirus funding. Late last month, a group of independent federal watchdogs tapped Fine, a career official, to lead the group asked preventing waste, fraud, and abuse. It's the most recent effort by Trump to undermine federal oversight. Late Friday night, the president fired the intelligence inspector general who reported a whistleblower complaint to Congress, thus touching off the impeachment investigation. On Monday, Trump repeatedly questioned the motives behind an in-depth investigation by the Health and Human Services Inspector General into supply shortages affecting the coronavirus response. A Defense Department spokesman did not explain why Fine was removed from the acting inspector general position, but she did explain that it meant he was no longer eligible to stay on the accountability committee, which is limited to inspector generals and acting inspector generals. The DoD OIG is still part of the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee. Twitter co-founder and CEO Jack Dorsey says he's dedicating more than a quarter of his wealth to a new fund for charitable causes, with the immediate focus on coronavirus relief efforts. Dorsey will transfer $1 billion of his equity in Square, the digital payments company he also co-founded, to a limited liability company called Start Small, he said in a series of tweets on Tuesday. Dorsey said that amount accounts for around 28% of his wealth. The first of those grants from Start Small from $1 lakh will go to America's Food Fund to provide meals to those impacted by the coronavirus, according to a Google Doc he shared for the tracking all the grants. Dorsey did not specify how much of the $1 billion commitment will be directed toward coronavirus relief as opposed to other charitable efforts after the pandemic ends. After we disarm the pandemic, the focus will shift to girls' health and education and UBI, he said, referring to the concept of universal basic income. I believe they represent the best long-term solutions to the existential problems facing the world. Dorsey's announcement following similar efforts by other big tech players, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos and Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates. The world's two wealthiest people have each pledged $1 lakh million toward coronavirus relief. Police in Bangladesh have arrested a fugitive killer of the country's independence leader Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, nearly 45 years after the brutal assassination, the country's home minister said. Abdul Majid, a former military captain, was arrested in the capital Dhaka on Tuesday. Home Minister Asaduzzaman Khan said, adding that the arrest was the biggest gift for Bangladesh this year. Majid has publicly announced his involvement in the assassination after the killing and had reportedly been hiding in India for many years. It was not clear when or how he returned to Bangladesh. Majid is one of the dozen defendants whose death sentences were upheld by the country's Supreme Court in 2009. A trial court in 1998 had sentenced them to death for their involvement in the August 15 killing of Rahman and most of his family members by a group of army officials. Rahman is the father of current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Hasina and his younger sister Sheikh Rehana were the only survivors in the family as they were visiting Germany during that. After that, subsequent governments and late President Ziaur Rahman avoided the killers by posting them mostly in Bangladesh diplomatic missions abroad. Footballers' world governing body has recommended extending players' contracts which were due to end in June and said it would allow transfer windows to be moved to allow for extensions to the current European season caused by the coronavirus pandemic. FIFA also said it would encourage clubs and players to work together to find agreements and solutions during the period when football is suspended. While the sport has to deal with an unprecedented loss of revenue. The new guidelines were endorsed by the FIFA Bureau, a reduced version of its decision-making council on Tuesday. The reputation of FIFA suffered considerably over the last decade, with controversy over past corruption still casting shadows over the organization. But football's world governing body has tried to be as protective as possible in this unfolding global health crisis. There has been a pledge to cascade funds through football from a substantial reserve fund, and now there is action to help clubs who are concerned by who and how and when their leagues can and will finish.